I stood in front of the mirror, staring at the black dress hugging my frame. It wasn't just any black dress, it had belonged to my mother, Lillian. She had worn it to her own engagement party decades ago, and before she passed away, she told me that if I ever found someone worth marrying, I should wear it with pride. But this wasn't the wedding I had dreamed of. My mother had always imagined me walking down the aisle in white, beaming with joy. Now, as I stared at my reflection, there was sadness etched in every corner of my face. Which city are you watching from? Drop it in the comments. And hey, make sure you watch till the end. Something's going to happen that you won't see coming. But also a quiet strength. Hazel, my best friend Meave called gently from the doorway. It's time. I took a deep breath, adjusting the pearl brooch at my neckline, my mother's heirloom, and followed her out of the room. The church was silent when I entered. All eyes turned toward me, and I could feel the weight of their stares as they took in the black dress. Some gasped softly, others whispered, but I kept walking, my gaze fixed forward. Lucas stood at the altar, looking bewildered. He hadn't seen me in this dress before today. The expression on his face shifted from confusion to something softer, something like understanding. Vivian, his mother, sat in the front row, her lips pressed into a thin, disapproving line. Her daughter, Elodie, turned to whisper something into her ear. I didn't need to hear the words to know they were cruel. As I reached the altar, the minister cleared his throat. Dearly beloved, we are gathered here today. But before he could continue, I raised a hand. I'm sorry, I said quietly, but I need to speak first. A ripple of confusion passed through the guests. Luca looked at me concerned, but didn't stop me. I turned slowly to face the congregation. I know many of you are wondering why I'm wearing black today, I began. It's not because I'm mourning love or grieving this union. No, I'm wearing black because I am honoring my mother, Lillian, who passed away last year. She wore this dress once, and she wanted me to wear it when I found someone worthy of my love. I paused, letting the silence settle. But today is not only about love, it's about truth. And before I can make any vows, there are things I need to share. Vivian shifted uncomfortably in her seat. Elodie clutched her clutch tighter. I turned back to Luca. Luca, I said softly, I love you, but I can't pretend anymore that everything has been okay. Your family has treated me with cruelty, disdain, and manipulation. And today, I found something I think everyone should see. From beneath the altar table, Meave brought me a folder. I opened it and pulled out a small device, my mother's old camcorder. I placed it on the nearby projector and pressed play. A grainy video appeared on the screen behind us. My mother's voice filled the church. If you're watching this, Hazel, then I'm not by your side. But I left this for you, because I needed you to know the truth. Gasps echoed through the church as the footage revealed recordings my mother had made in her final months. Secretly, she had documented conversations and interactions, proof of Vivian's lies and cruelty. One clip showed Vivian mocking my background. Another showed Elodie digging through my belongings. But the most damning part came near the end. The screen showed Vivian speaking into the phone, arranging for part of a charity donation meant for a cancer foundation to be rerouted to her personal account. I can't believe this, someone in the crowd whispered. Elodie shot up from her seat, her face pale. This is a lie. You edited that. No, Elodie, I said calmly. This is the truth my mother left behind. She knew what I didn't, and she protected me, even from the grave. Vivian stood abruptly. This is slander. I won't stand here and be humiliated like this. She began walking toward the exit, her heels clicking sharply against the marble floor. But I wasn't finished. I took the microphone again, my voice firmer now. Vivian, Elodie, my wedding isn't over yet. They stopped, stunned. Luca turned to me, his eyes shining with a mixture of pain and apology. Hazel, I didn't know. I swear, I didn't know my mother and sister were capable of this. I looked at him, the man I loved. I needed you to believe me when I told you what they'd done. But you didn't. He paused for a long moment, then turned to the guests. Everyone, I'm sorry. I truly am. But this is the truth. My mother and sister tried to destroy Hazel's mother's heirloom dress. They tried to sabotage this wedding, and I can't stay silent. He took my hands in his. From today, I'm cutting ties with their lies. Hazel, I love you. In black or white or anything else, you are the most beautiful woman I've ever known. A low murmur moved through the church. Guests glanced at one another, surprised and unsure. But then, just as the atmosphere began to shift, the doors swung open again. 2 police officers stepped into the church. Miss Vivian Williams, one said, scanning the crowd. We'd like to speak with you about an ongoing investigation into embezzlement. The entire room froze. I glanced down at the camcorder in my hand. My mother left detailed instructions. She didn't just give me this evidence, she also showed me how to report it to the authorities. I filed everything last night. Vivian paled, her lips trembling. You can't be serious. This is a misunderstanding. She grabbed one of the officer's sleeves, her voice desperate. I'm a respected member of this community, but her makeup had begun to melt under the pressure, and sweat trickled down her forehead. The dignified mask was slipping. Elodie stood beside her, dabbing at her face with a handkerchief, her own eyes brimming with tears. The church was silent again. 200 guests watched, breath held, as the Williams family crumbled before them. I turned back to the officers. Please, let them stay until the ceremony is over. This is still my wedding day. They exchanged a look and nodded. Wait. The minister, clearly flustered, cleared his throat again. Shall we continue with the vows? Lucas squeezed my hand tightly. His smile, though pained, was full of gratitude. The minister gathered himself and began again. His voice trembled slightly, but he pushed forward. Dearly beloved, we are gathered here today to celebrate the union of Hazel and Luca, not just as husband and wife, but as partners in truth, resilience, and love. I looked into Luca's eyes, and in them, I saw a storm slowly calming. There was regret, yes, but also strength and determination, something real and raw that hadn't been there before. He nodded at me, just slightly, letting me know without words that he was ready. The vows we exchanged were not rehearsed. We hadn't even prepared them beforehand, but maybe that made them more genuine. I didn't grow up believing in fairy tales. I began softly, my voice echoing slightly off the tall church walls. But I did believe in strength, the kind that comes from holding on when everything tells you to let go. My mother taught me that. I paused, glancing at the guests, who were now listening with unflinching attention. Luca, I continued, loving you hasn't been easy. There were days I wanted to run, days when your silence hurt more than words ever could. But I stayed, not out of fear or pride, but because I believed in us. I still do. Luca's hands were trembling as he took a breath. Hazel, I thought, love meant protecting people from the truth. I see now how wrong I was. You didn't need shielding. You needed honesty. And I failed you. He looked down, voice catching. But you still showed up today, even when you had every reason not to. You honored your mother. You honored yourself. And you honored us. That's a kind of bravery I never knew existed. I swear, from this day forward, I'll never let silence replace the words you deserve to hear. A tear slipped down my cheek, not from sadness but from a strange, quiet relief. The minister looked between us and smiled gently. By the power vested in me, I now pronounce you husband and wife. You may, if you still wish, share your first kiss. A nervous laugh rippled through the pews. Luca reached out, hesitated for a heartbeat, then pulled me gently toward him. Our kiss was not dramatic or showy, it was soft, like an apology and a promise wrapped into one. As we turned to face the guests, the weight of the moment settled in. There was cautious applause, people unsure whether to cheer or hold back. But then Maeve, always bold, stood up and clapped hard. Soon others followed. Some smiled. A few even wiped their eyes. As we walked down the aisle together, Luca leaned in and whispered, "Are you okay?" I nodded. For the first time in a long time, yes. Outside, the sun had started to dip behind the Boston skyline. The cold air bit at our cheeks, but I felt warm. Luca's hand was tightly wrapped around mine like an anchor. We didn't speak for a while. We just stood there, letting the weight of the day fall away. Finally, he spoke. I want to make things right, not just with you, but with everything. I turned to him. What do you mean? I mean the foundation, my father's name, the money my mother's been misusing, all of it. I want to dismantle what's rotten and build something good in its place, something your mother would be proud of. I felt my breath catch. Lillian would have loved that. I want to call it the Lillian Memorial Fund, he said, to help single mothers and their children, people like you and your mom, people who fight every day without applause. My knees nearly gave out, and I leaned into him. That's the most beautiful thing I've ever heard. He kissed my forehead. Then it settled. We didn't go to the reception immediately. Instead, we took a detour, just the two of us, driving slowly through the streets of the city, headlights streaking past like soft echoes of the day's chaos. He held my hand the whole ride. When we arrived at the reception venue, the mood had shifted. People weren't whispering anymore, they were smiling, hugging, offering quiet congratulations. I walked into that room in my black dress and realized something had changed. I wasn't just the bride in mourning. I was the woman who had stood up for herself and her mother, who had defended love and truth with unwavering strength. Meve met me at the entrance, her eyes gleaming. Hazel, you were magnificent. I hugged her tightly. I don't know if I was brave or just angry. Both, she said. And it was glorious. Dinner passed in a blur, clinking glasses, soft music, laughter that finally felt free of tension. For the first time, I could breathe. During the toast, one of Luca's old friends raised his glass. To Hazel, he said, for being the kind of woman stories are written about. I blushed, but a small smile crept onto my face. Maybe this would become a story one day. A strange, messy, beautiful story. Later that night, as Luca and I danced our first slow dance, I whispered to him, "Thank you for believing me now, for choosing me. I should have done it sooner," he said, "but you did it today. That's what counts." We moved slowly in each other's arms as the song played. The room blurred into soft lights and warm smiles. Somewhere behind us, Vivian and Elodie had slipped away, escorted gently but firmly by the officers waiting outside. I didn't feel victorious. I didn't feel vengeful. I just felt free. The rest of the night passed with the hum of music and muffled footsteps, with clinking forks and warm cake. And hands joined in celebration, and in the quiet moments between conversations and dancing, I'd glance at the pearl brooch pinned to my neckline, the only piece of my mother's dress that remained. I would never forget what was taken from me, but I would also never forget what she gave me in return: strength, grace, and a love that lived on, quiet and eternal. A month passed like a dream, a whirlwind of paperwork, farewells, and quiet evenings wrapped in each other's arms. James, no longer Luca, as he had decided to go by his middle name going forward, had started using his father's name to reclaim the life that had been twisted by Eleanor's manipulation. And I started letting myself breathe again. We held a second, much smaller wedding. Not a redo, but something more personal. Just us. A gathering of about 50 close friends and colleagues, in a lush garden tucked away in the Boston suburbs. This time, I wore white. The dress was simple, elegant, nothing extravagant, but it was mine. At the neckline, Katie had sewn my mother's pearl brooch. The way it caught the light made my heart ache with both joy and remembrance. The design, though modern, carried an echo of the dress my mother once wore. It was as if her presence was stitched into the seams, reminding me she was still here in spirit. "You're truly beautiful," James whispered, his eyes damp with emotion as I walked down the small stone path toward him. The ceremony was intimate, heartfelt. No big declarations, no press, just those who mattered. Friends from the hospital, a few of James's remaining relatives who had stood by him, and people who had seen the raw edges of our story unfold. Katie, who had become more than just a designer to me, stood nearby with a smile. She had been my rock over the last month, helping with not just the dress, but with all the small, silent details that held the day together. James had spent those 4 weeks navigating the legal labyrinth surrounding his mother's embezzlement case. Eleanor had been formally charged with misappropriating large sums from the charitable foundation. The local newspapers had dubbed it, "Behind the Mask of Charity," the fall of Eleanor Caldwell, her polished public image shattered in a matter of days. She was currently out on bail, her social status irreparably damaged. Invitations stopped, friends vanished. Her name, once spoken with reverence in Boston's elite circles, had become something of a cautionary tale. But the real surprise came from Diana. She chose to distance herself from her mother and testify for the prosecution. I still remember the day I heard the news. I had been watering the small herbs in the kitchen windowsill when the call came. "She's cooperating," James had said, almost in disbelief. "She gave them everything: emails, ledgers, audio recordings." It turned out Eleanor's grip on her daughter had been more manipulation than love. Without her mother's influence, Diana seemed to be discovering who she really was. A week after the testimony, I received a letter from her. It was handwritten. Slanted, careful script. "Hazel, I don't expect forgiveness. What I did, what I allowed to happen, was inexcusable. I was weak, and I hurt you. But I'm trying to be different now. If someday you're open to hearing me, I'd like to talk. Sincerely, Diana didn't know how to feel. Not anger, not pity, just a strange quietness in my chest. I wasn't ready to meet with her, not yet. But maybe one day. In the meantime, James had begun the process of reclaiming the family's financial legacy. The assets his father had left long buried under Eleanor's deception were rightfully his. They had been mishandled and misused for years. He used a portion of it to purchase our new home, a small house in the Boston suburbs. Nothing grand, but filled with light, warm wood floors, a garden with soft grass, the kind of place that made you want to take your shoes off and just exist. This is where our new story begins, James had said, holding my hand on the front steps. The walls smelled of fresh paint and possibility. I could imagine Sunday mornings here, laughter spilling from the kitchen, wind chimes on the porch, a space where peace wasn't a fantasy, but a routine. During the housewarming, Katie stood and raised her glass to Hazel and James, to starting over not because you have to, but because you choose to family however it's made, and to Lillian, whose strength flows through this house like sunlight. The room echoed with soft cheers. I looked around and saw faces that mattered, people who had loved me when I couldn't love myself. Colleagues, friends, even James's uncle and his partner from Vermont. It was the first time I felt the true warmth of a family not tied by blood, but by choice. Near the end of the evening, James surprised me again. He stepped up with a microphone in hand, his voice steady. I'd like to make an announcement, he began. Today, I'm officially dissolving the Caldwell Foundation. The structure my mother built no longer serves its purpose. A hush fell over the room. In its place, I'll be establishing the Lillian Memorial Fund, named after the woman who raised the strongest, kindest person I know. This fund will support single mothers and their children, providing education, housing assistance, and medical care. Gasps. Applause. I didn't try to stop the tears that fell. I didn't even care if my makeup was ruined. My mother's name. I whispered, it's going to mean something good again. James nodded. It already does. That night, as we sat on the back porch under a sky full of stars, I felt something I hadn't felt in a long time. Safe. 1 year later, our lives changed again. A baby girl. We named her Lillian. Her hair was soft and dark like mine. Her eyes James's. Green-gray. She was small but fierce, with a cry that made the world stop. When I held her for the first time, I thought of my mother and how she must have felt holding me. I carried Lillian to the framed photo of her namesake hanging in our hallway. Her tiny fingers wrapped around my thumb as I whispered, Mom, just like you protected me until the very end, now it's my turn. I'll protect her. I promise. That spring, James and I planted a young apple tree in our backyard. The soil was damp, the air crisp. With Lillian strapped to my chest in a baby carrier, I watched as James shoveled earth into the hole. Think it'll grow? He asked. It has to. I smiled. It's part of our story now. The apple tree became a symbol not just of our daughter's future, but of the strength that had passed from my mother, through me, and now into the next generation. Every year, when the blossoms bloom, I bake my mom's apple pie recipe. And every year, I sit under that tree and tell Lillian about the grandmother she never met, the woman who fought for truth, who stitched pearls into the fabric of love, who stood for something bigger than herself. The story that began the day I walked down the aisle in a black dress didn't end in heartbreak. It became the prologue to something better. Something honest. It became the legacy of a mother's love, reimagined. The seasons shifted, and with them, our lives found a gentler rhythm. In the mornings, I would wake to the sound of Lillian's soft breathing and James quietly making coffee. In the kitchen, our home was not extravagant, but it didn't need to be. Every corner held a memory, a promise, a sense of having earned this peace. Katie often visited on weekends, bringing fresh herbs or new design sketches just to show me. I'm working on a line inspired by real women, she'd said one afternoon as we sat in the garden. And you're my first muse. I laughed, brushing soil off my hands as I planted new flowers near the apple tree. Me, a muse? You wore grief and strength like they were stitched together, she said softly. That black dress, it changed the way I think about design. The memory of that day, my wedding day, was no longer painful. It had become something else. A story I told Lillian as she grew. A story of resilience, of finding love and truth in the ashes. Diana reached out again. It had been nearly a year since her first letter. This time, she sent a video message. She looked different, calmer. Her hair was shorter, and her voice trembled as she spoke. Hazel. If you're watching this, thank you. I know you didn't have to. I've been volunteering at a women's shelter, trying to understand the damage I helped cause, not just to you, but to others. I won't ask you to forgive me, but I do want you to know I'm not the same person anymore. I showed the video to James that evening. He watched it silently, his jaw tense, his eyes unreadable. She means it, he finally said. I think she really does. I nodded. Maybe one day I'll be ready to hear her out, but not yet. Healing wasn't linear. Some days the past felt like a shadow, other days like distant thunder. But we moved forward always. The Lillian Memorial Fund grew faster than we imagined. In its first year, it had helped over 100 single mothers across Massachusetts, providing rent assistance, school supplies, even scholarships. James threw himself into the work. This new mission gave him a purpose he'd long been denied under Eleanor's expectations. One afternoon, I came across him sitting quietly at his desk, reviewing letters from recipients. You okay? I asked. He nodded, holding up one handwritten note. This woman named Teresa. She wrote that she'd been ready to give up, but then someone at a shelter handed her a brochure with Mom's name on it. He paused. She said it gave her hope. I sat beside him, leaning my head on his shoulder. It's working. She's still helping people, James, just in a different way. He smiled, brushing a kiss across my temple. We were building a life rooted in honesty, humility, and choice, not pressure or image. I returned to work part-time at the hospital when Lillian turned 2, and the feeling of putting on my scrubs again, stepping back into that space of healing, felt like reclaiming a part of myself I'd set aside. My colleagues welcomed me back with open arms. Even some patients recognized me from a newspaper story that had circulated quietly about our wedding. They didn't bring it up out of sensationalism, only to say they admired the strength it took to stand in that moment, in black, alone, and still walk forward. One young woman, a teenage mother in recovery, grabbed my hand after an appointment and whispered, "You made me feel like it's okay to start over." That stayed with me. I no longer needed public approval or grand gestures to feel worthy. My days were full of small victories, laughter at dinner, watching Lillian discover her love for picture books, holding James's hand on our evening walks through the neighborhood. Sometimes we'd stop at the apple tree and look up at the growing branches, strong and reaching. Think we'll need to plant another one soon? He joked one evening, eyes glinting. I smirked. Are you asking if we should expand our orchard or our family? He shrugged, pretending to think. Both sound good to me. We laughed, standing beneath the soft rustle of leaves. The black dress that once felt like an act of defiance now hung preserved in a glass frame in our hallway. It wasn't just a dress, it was a turning point, a symbol of truth, courage, and the moment I stopped trying to be what others needed and finally became myself. When Lillian was old enough, I told her the story behind it. I kept it simple, childlike, but truthful. Grandma, Lillian loved you before you were even born, I'd say as we sat on the porch swing. And even though she couldn't be here, she helped us find our way. This dress reminded me of her strength, and that strength lives in you too. She would nod seriously, her little face thoughtful. I'm strong like Grandma? The strongest, I'd whisper, pulling her close. On the 3rd anniversary of our wedding, James surprised me with something quietly beautiful. A scrapbook, filled with printed photos, handwritten memories, and letters we'd written to each other during the hardest times. On the last page, he had written, Hazel, you walked into my life with a black dress and a broken heart, but you didn't let it define you. You rebuilt everything with grace, grit, and more love than I ever thought I deserved. Thank you for choosing me, for building this family, for being Lillian's mother, and for reminding me that even in the darkest moments, there's a way forward. Love always, James. I cried, of course. The quiet kind of tears that come when you realize you've made it through the storm, not untouched, but stronger. That night, I looked out the window at the apple tree. The stars above seemed to shimmer a little brighter, and, for a moment, I imagined my mother there watching. Mom, I whispered into the dark, you protected me until the end, and now it's my turn to protect this life, our family, her. The journey that began with grief, betrayal, and public shame had become something else entirely, a celebration of truth, a legacy of love, and the beginning of a life I never dared to imagine until I had no choice but to fight for it.